I am the founder of the Society for Esoteric and Entheogenic Knowledge, or S.E.E.K. We have channels on YouTube, Patreon, and Ko-Fi at Join S.E.E.K, or Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Join S.E.E.K1. Today, I am joined by Gauri Kapoor. Gauri Kapoor is a lifelong student and practitioner of Hinduism who was raised in an Orthodox Hindu household before developing a deep interest in the mystical, philosophical, and esoteric dimensions of the tradition. Drawing from both lived experience and contemplative practice, Gauri explores subjects including Advaita Vedanta, yoga, Tantra, meditation, and the universal search for self-realization, while remaining deeply rooted in the devotional heart of Hinduism. We recently had the privilege of celebrating Mahashivaratri together at the Radha Krishna Temple in Dallas, making this conversation a natural continuation of our shared exploration into one of the world's oldest and most profound spiritual systems. Thank you very much for joining me, Gauri. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you for having me, Nick. It's an honor to be here and to discuss something we're both passionate about.
Well, thank you again for your time. Let's dive into it. Hinduism contains many dimensions that range from temple worship, festivals, family customs, and social traditions to profound philosophical systems that investigate the nature of consciousness. Schools such as Advaita Vedanta, Kashmir Shaivism, yoga, and Tantra emphasize direct realization over mere belief. Throughout history, many influential teachers have pointed seekers beyond ritual toward immediate knowledge of ultimate reality. Similar movements from outward religion toward inward realization can also be found among Christian contemplatives, Sufi mystics, Kabbalists, Buddhist lamas, Neoplatonists, and Taoist sages. So you grew up in an Orthodox Hindu household, but eventually gravitated toward a more mystical and esoteric understanding of Hinduism. What inspired that transformation, and how did that understanding of Hinduism evolve from external religion into direct spiritual experience?
I constantly questioned, why do we practice certain things in certain ways? And I also questioned in the idea of, why don't we incorporate these ideas and these practices into everyday life? Why are we separating these special events, these holidays, these fasting days, separating them from everyday life and making them such a big deal? I kind of came up with questions for myself. And on top of that, I had my own personal journey on healing myself. I lost a lot of weight. So it started off with a question mark, like, everything I do now, am I doing it right? And is it the right way to do it? If there is a right or a wrong. And it's just constantly picking deeper and deeper and deeper into a point and understanding and realizing that there's no right or wrong. It's just a gradient that you have to go through and a bunch of possibilities that you see that can become outcomes if you choose correctly yourself. So it kind of pulled me away from that religion aspect to thinking that there's this mystical, magical person in the sky, or this lady sitting on this majestic lion who can grant me wishes, because I constantly thought to them and believed in them and prayed to them to make my life better, and that never happened. It's when I decided to find that divinity within, find that piece of awareness, that constant thinking about what I can do better in all aspects of life, caused that trigger of me, being able to transform in many aspects. I mean, I think you remember me from 8 years ago. I'm a very, I don't want to say different person. I'm the same Gauri, but it's just a different version of myself. And that's what kind of got me into this esoteric kind of understanding that everybody has their own version of the truth, but the truth never changes.
And that's a good point. For those who aren't aware, the word esoteric comes from the Greek esoterikos and means inner, as in the knowledge reserved for the inner circle. And this duality of the intrinsic nature of mystical or esoteric philosophy, direct realization, gnosis, directly opposes this belief system in Orthodox faiths, whether it's Hinduism, Christianity, or others, where it's expected that you're to take this concept that's given to you and believe it without directly experiencing it, versus the more mystical esoteric understanding of seeking out this divine truth for the self and incorporating it holistically into your practice, your ritual, your philosophy, your system of understanding, and then moving forward with that personal connection to the divine. When you look back over your life, is there a specific instance or moment that encapsulated this questioning of the Orthodox faith that you had grown up in to move toward the more mystical, esoteric interpretation?
I think it was the time when I was learning about Kundalini yoga. I started focusing on breath work and how different positions of your body can activate certain regions of your mind as well, because nowadays we don't think of these things to be in harmony with each other. We think that, oh, the brain is like just, a computer, and your body is just like a machine that's being controlled by this computer. But nobody understands that the soul, body, and mind are apart from you. That understanding of I have the ability to think about my soul. I have the ability to think about my thoughts, which is my mind. And I have the ability to think about my body. So that separates the I from everything, right? And so I just constantly, in Kundalini yoga, you're always thinking about Satnam. Satnam. You say the name truthfully. That's what that means. Sat is true. Nam is the name. So Sri Vaheguru, that's a Sikh mantra as well. But it came out of Kundalini yoga. And so I was practicing that over years. And I went to one particular class, and I don't know what happened. I felt that electric feeling that they always describe you to get when you do certain breath work. And from that moment forward, my thought process has changed. I'm more cohesive when it comes to understanding other people's ideas, but incorporating them with mine and not just constantly countering others. And for some reason, that allowed me to lose 100 pounds. I know it's kind of like, whoa, that's kind of impossible. But it was in August of 23 when I had my first official Kundalini experience with a yogi. And it caused me to really experience something different. And from that point forward, I realized that there is way more to this. And it's just not religion that's supposed to dictate your life. It's an idea that we have laws, the eternal laws. That's what Sanatan Dharma actually means. Dharma are the laws. Sanatana, it means the eternal laws or the essential laws. So we're all being governed by those. And so how much can you observe and focus on those laws everywhere in all absolute forms of nature, right? And so I just started connecting myself to nature, going out more into the open air, just basic things people think is just so loony, we don't like connecting to nature nowadays. And from there, I just realized that there is a world outside of us, but it starts from healing ourselves within.
Very good. I'm glad you brought up Kundalini. We will touch on that momentarily. And yes, this connection to nature is seen throughout esoteric and entheogenic spiritual systems. Entheogenic also comes from Greek roots, generating the divine within, referring to visionary plants across global spiritual history that were able to connect humanity with this divine source. So thank you also for bringing that up. And also, we see the connection between the mind, the body, the soul in Sufism with the Ruh, the Nafs, the Qalb, and this wisdom, Sir, that comes from the pursuit of gnosis or direct experience. So throughout global spiritual history, we also see this Trinitarian ideal of body, mind, spirit, body, spirit, soul, that connects one to this greater truth or understanding of conscious reality. Moving on to our next question. The Upanishads repeatedly ask one of humanity's oldest questions: who are we beneath the changing personality? Rather than identifying consciousness as something produced by the brain, many Hindu philosophical schools propose that consciousness is fundamental and that individual awareness, or Atman, is an expression of an infinite reality called Brahman. Famous Mahavakyas such as Tat Tvam Asi, or Thou art that, and Aham Brahmasmi, meaning I am Brahman, express this identity between the individual self and the absolute. Comparable ideas appear in Mahayana Buddhism's discussions of Buddha nature, Plotinus's vision of the One, Meister Eckhart's Ground of the Soul, Ibn Arabi's Doctrine of the Unity of Being, and aspects of Jewish Kabbalah describing the unfolding of the infinite. So Advaita Vedanta, or non-duality, teaches that Atman and Brahman are ultimately one. How do you personally understand this relationship, and what practical difference does that realization make in everyday life?
I kind of feel like a broken record. I give this particular example to anybody that asks me about religion in a sense. I kind of say that imagine the animal kingdom and you see a lion. A lion, if it gets angry, what is it going to do? It's going to rip the weakest animal or whatever it considers weak in front of it, its head off. That's just its instinct. It goes off of instinct, its nature. It doesn't have the ability to control its mood. That's where I think consciousness and human beings play in. The main idea of being a human. You can't make animal beings. You can call them animals, but that consciousness that human beings have, allow them to be. So for instance, if I get angry and I'm in a room with somebody who I'm angry at, I don't have the ability to go in there and be violent like a lion would be. I have that inner consciousness that allows me to calm down, to understand, to pull out my thoughts, to separate them in my mind and understand what I need to do at that moment. So that's where we're able to pick our possibilities. People always have this idea that, oh, I'm being controlled by destiny. It was written in my destiny. Well, what about all those choices that you had the ability to make right before those outcomes came into place, right? That's where karma comes into place. So I think that duality is that our awareness kind of strays away from our instinct, and us human beings have the ability to combine them two together to be the best version of ourselves. So we can have the intensity of our instincts, but the pureness, the righteousness, the ideas that our thoughts have, they kind of dictate those instincts, that karmic nature that nature gives us naturally, prakriti. That's the whole idea of Purush and Prakriti, right? Purush is always static. It's always constant. It's like matter in a sense. Prakriti, on the other hand, is that transformative energy, that energy that when it's applied to Purush constantly changes and it becomes creative energy at that point. And so in my mind, I think Advait means that you bring these two ideas together into unison to make yourself a better being.
I like what you were saying about this consciousness and creative energy. For those who aren't aware, the Sri Yantra symbol is this unification of this duality of male and female, masculine, feminine, where the Shiva represents the consciousness, Shakti represents the creative energy. We see this process also replicated in the alchemical conjunctio, or the rectification of opposites. Carl Jung also describes it in his individuation process, bringing the unconscious to the conscious and rectifying these opposites so that one can be made whole. So I think that's a great point as well. More specifically, do you see the Atman as the individual flaws within humanity, and then the Brahman as the perfected ideal and the archetype, and the unification therein would be trying to merge this individual flawed self with this perfect ordered conscious system? Or how would you word the duality?
I think it's kind of like the concept of Maya, where people think Maya, which is illusion, is like what the Atman is constantly experiencing. And once that experience is over, we're supposed to be in that ultimate phase of reality, right? Away from illusion. Not travel, but we're able to go on this journey of within, heal within ourselves to make this Brahman, what I call it Brahman, a better place. When we say place, what is place? Just where we're being placed at that moment. There's no place, you can just go to. It's where you're supposed to be placed at that very moment. I think that's where the concept of time comes in too. They say it's an illusion. They say it's Maya. That's the karmic cycle of time that everybody keeps referring to. So I think it's just constantly being stuck in this matrix and this idea that what is right, what is wrong is right in front of us. But we consciously pick our choices and know what the outcomes will be.
Would you say that the average Orthodox practitioner in Hinduism views Brahman as a separate force outside of Atman? I know in Christianity, this concept of the soul, that's an individual thing, and we're tied to this celestial father or personified anthropomorphic figure in the sky that seems to be separate, but also can dwell within us in a more mystical, esoteric sense. But would you say that the average Orthodox practitioner sees this as a duality, or is it pretty unified within Hinduism as a whole?
No, it's a duality. They also think like the idea of praying to this God will help them fix all their problems and bring this healing aspect, without trying hard. I think when it comes down to putting in the effort for yourself, people forget that when they're so dependent on religion, that's where that religious aspect comes in, that orthodox aspect comes in, that the outside world is responsible for all the things that are happening to me. When in reality, it's your inner world, it's your inner Brahman, I say that too sometimes, that is causing all of these changes around you. And you don't even realize it because most of the people aren't that cautious within themselves. They're just so cautious about everything that's going on the outside. They forget themselves in the process.
Beautifully said. And I'm glad you brought up Maya. You kind of segued perfectly into the next question, so I will proceed accordingly. In many Hindu traditions, Maya does not necessarily imply that the world is unreal, but rather that reality is perceived through limitation, attachment, and mistaken identification with the ego. Moksha refers to liberation from this ignorance through direct realization. Mystical experiences reported through meditation, contemplation, devotion, and profound states of awareness often describe a temporary dissolution of ordinary identity, accompanied by overwhelming unity, timelessness, compassion, and clarity. Comparable descriptions appear in Buddhist enlightenment narratives, Sufi Fa-Na or annihilation in God, Christian union with God, Kabbalistic devakut or attachment to God, and Neoplatonic ecstatic contemplation. So many people hear the word Maya translated simply as illusion, yet the concept is often much more nuanced. How do you understand Maya, Moksha, and the role that mystical experience plays in overcoming ignorance?
People, like in the Orthodox practice, understand moksha as this like concept of heaven. That we're gonna go, there's gonna be light and pure like ecstasy and happiness, and it's gonna be after death. But that's where they stop. I guess they stop living at that point while they're alive. For me, I think that it's like a very cheesy saying, heaven is a state of mind, hell is a state of mind, love is a state of mind. Everything is a state of mind. And in Hinduism, if we actually talk about the esoteric practice of it and not the Orthodox, they say when you die, your soul, that piece of divinity within you, whatever it is, whatever mood it's projecting, whatever idea it's projecting at that time, will be 1,000, 10,000 times fold. So in my mind, I think when we're in this constant loop of Maya and Moksha, we get stuck. That's that limbo effect that Dante talks about. You're constantly just stuck because once you're in Moksha, well, you want more. Like you want that, taste of humanity, what that ability of being human is. Because if you think about the Orthodox culture of Hinduism, gods are supposed to be put on this pedestal. They're supposed to be this ideal image of righteousness and not doing anything wrong. But in reality, what made them at that godly level, nobody understands. Nobody understands all the negatives that they've gone through. Nobody understands all the pain that they've gone through. Nobody understands the back history of their actual position, if that makes sense. So I think Maya and Moksha is just constantly a circle that we're going through. And once we break that circle ourselves, I think that's the ultimate liberation that we can get, because it's in this life that we have the ability to think, not after death. After death, I don't think the brain in this third dimensional world is active unless you donate it to somebody, right? So whatever you're thinking about liberation, it should be now. So your thoughts naturally should be pure. That's why in Hinduism, they think about whatever you put into your body controls your body. They put everything at a certain level, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. where sattvic is the most purest form of any sort of thing that's consumable: water, food, air, energy. Rajasic is more where it's made for humans, like we're constantly supposed to be in that sweet, spicy, sour realm. It's not very dull in nature, very sparky, like you're very all over the place, bouncy. And then the tamas is a very state of inertia. It's where you, as an energy force, have the most resistance. They associate, a bed that you sleep into tamas energy, or mushrooms to tamas energy. A lot of different types of foods are categorized into tamas energy. So if you're practicing Hinduism or you're practicing yoga or Ayurveda, they always say to eat more sattvic. So in that sense, you're able to produce those energies within you that are more pure while you're living, rather than you just waiting, okay, if I die, if I do everything good now, I'll go to heaven. What about the hell you're putting yourself through right now physically? That's why I think shouldn't separate health from religion, or spirituality from health, or that's where I think that these practices should be married every day into your everyday practices, everyday life.
It reminds me of the verse, the body is the temple. I see that playing through all of these spiritual systems. And for those who aren't aware, in Eastern philosophy and contemplative spirituality, there's this concept of samsara, this death and rebirth cycle that is endless until one can achieve liberation, whether in Buddhism called nirvana, Sikhism called mukti, or Hinduism called moksha. And that is the final liberation from this cycle of suffering, reincarnation. We also see this concept of this final renovation at the end of time, and the Zoroastrian concept of fruscio cureti. And there's a Sufi mystic that I really appreciate that kind of encapsulates this discussion about whether heaven and hell exist as this final destination, this place for the damned, or paradise for the followers of any faith, or if it's this internal consciousness. And there was a Sufi mystic called Rabia al-Adawiya, and she said that she carried a torch in one hand and a bucket of water in the other. She said she was going to set fire to heaven and put out the flames of hell so that each may worship God just for the sake of divinity alone, not expecting paradise, not fearing damnation, but simply to coexist with this conscious creative energy. So I think that was a beautiful point. Moving on, I would like to go back to Kundalini. You mentioned it earlier. The Sanskrit word for yoga literally refers to union and encompasses an enormous family of contemplative disciplines. Raja Yoga emphasizes concentration and meditation. Jnana Yoga emphasizes philosophical inquiry and wisdom. Bhakti Yoga emphasizes devotion and love. Karma Yoga emphasizes selfless action and service. Kundalini traditions describe the gradual awakening of latent spiritual potential, symbolized by the ascent of energy through the chakras, in the conceptual landscape of Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Classical texts and numerous tantras describe these practices as methods of transforming consciousness rather than simply improving physical health. How do you distinguish meditation, yoga, and Kundalini awakening from the popular modern interpretations that often reduce them to physical exercise or isolated techniques?
If you think about it, any sort of yoga that you perform, it's a time of focus where you have to be constantly focused on your breath, when you're inhaling, when you're exhaling, and the motions your body is going through. So in that essence, you're thinking about your thoughts, you're thinking about your physical body, and you're thinking about your breath. So that's where I think the word Tantra kind of gets a negative connotation, because Tantra is automatically assumed as, magic. But it's not magic to me. I think I said it to you when I came over once, that Yantra is the device. Mantra is the breath that you put into the device to cause it to act. So then the Tantra is the action that comes from that, right? So when we perform yoga, not only are you focusing on your thoughts, as I started the conversation of, you're thinking about your thoughts, you're thinking about your breath, you're thinking about your body. And the breath is supposed to be the direct source of soul. Like that's what they say that your soul is controlled with. So your breath work has the ability to really elevate your energies, in the sense that There are yogis as we speak, they're in like minus 10, 15, 20 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and they're able to do this breath work just because they're so focused on that inner consciousness, that piece of divinity that they think is within them, not on the outside. I don't know what they call it, but when you bring all these things together in union, it causes some beautiful things to happen within. And people only think that, oh, I need something out of it. Like I need the best result out of it, the fastest result out of it. It's gonna do amazing for me. But they don't understand that that amazingness starts from them, and they can bring it out into the world through their actions, through that tantra.
You kind of reminded me of the mantra Om Namah Shivaya. If you look at the syllable roots, Om is this invocative blessing. It attunes one to the consciousness of creation. And then you have the syllables Namah Shivaya that correspond to the elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. We see something similar in Judaism, especially with reference to the breath, with the Tetragrammaton, this four-letter name of God, Yud, He, Vav, He. It's supposed to symbolize the sound of breath that's inherent within all of us, the only way to express this ineffable creative force. And when you insert the Hebrew letter Shin, which there's also the tie between the syllable Shi and Shin, it represents this fire, this flaming heart put into the breast of the individual that allows one to connect with this greater source. The Yud He Vav He becomes Yeshua or Yahshua, which is the name for Jesus. So it's this philosophical connection between the elements of the cosmos, earth, water, fire, air, the spirit that's intrinsic in the center, and this concept of this breath, this life force that enables one to maintain vitality, to flourish and evolve through the creative evolution of time. So I think that's a great point as well.
You reminded me when you said that flame is kind of what's causing that breath to work. So another name for Shiv, there's 108 names given to Lord Shiva. One of his first names, the very first name was Sadashiv. So Sadashiv means the Shiv that's always eternal, the eternal Shiv. And they say his projection, when he was projected into existence from Shakti, his form was literally a beam of fiery light that had no end and no beginning to it. It just shot constantly. And there was a whole, like, I don't know, there's symbolism behind it, of course, but the Orthodox story is that Lord Vishnu and Lord Brahma had this argument, like in the beginning of time, that, oh, I'm going to be the supreme god of everybody. Oh, no, I'm going to be the supreme god of everybody. And so this aspect of Sadashiv came into existence and kind of navigated them and said that whoever can find my end or whoever can find my beginning will be the winner of this. And so in this competition, Lord Vishnu went down, Brahma went up, and Brahma basically lied in this whole competition. The symbolism is interesting behind it because in a sense, it's that idea of we have these ideas constantly going through within our brains. And we can also manipulate the truth ourselves too, because that's what Brahma did. Brahma is an aspect of human creation because he is the creator. So in that aspect, he lied and said, oh, I did find the top. And to prove it, here's this flower. This flower, she witnessed it, and the flower knows that I didn't go to the top. He convinced her to lie, essentially, to Lord Shiva. And when Vishnu came, he was humble and he said, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. I don't know. I don't think there's an end to this. I don't think there's a beginning to this. So Lord Shiva said, I know you lied, Brahma. For that reason, you will not win this competition. And whatever this flower is doing, that flower will never be like served to me in any devotion, in any practice, in any yug, in any havan. This flower will not be served to me just because it partook in your lie. So it's just that idea that we have these thoughts in us and we have the ability to pick what is the truth and what is not the truth. But in order for us to gain that powerful aspect, we do lie to ourselves blatantly. And so Sadashiv in that aspect is our own internal consciousness. And Brahma is that creative force. Vishnu is that preservation going on. So preservation in that aspect was more important than creative force. So it's an interesting concept. I think that first story of Shiv, that's that first form of him, is just a form of light and heat and no end, no beginning, just eternal breath.
It's interesting to me how the concept of the flower has come to represent this divinity within, or some conscious understanding of divinity beyond rational comprehension, whether it's the lotus in Hinduism that many deities are seated upon or holding, or in Rosicrucian philosophy, there's the idea of the rose cross, this rose in the center of the cross symbolizing this flowering of divine life, the connection to the cosmic source, and this crucifixion upon the elements of earth, water, fire, and air. So it's interesting to me to see how flowers coexist within all these different traditions, East and West, in terms of the connection between man and woman and deity. So very interesting. Moving on, one of Hinduism's most remarkable features is its recognition that different personalities may approach the sacred through different means. Some are drawn by love, devotion, others through philosophy, others through disciplined meditation, and still others through compassionate service. We spoke about the yogas in the last question. The Bhagavad Gita integrates all of these approaches into a unified vision of spiritual life. Similar complementary paths appear throughout world traditions, where contemplation, knowledge, ethical action, prayer, ritual, and selfless service work together as different expressions of a common search for wisdom. So do you see Bhakti, Jnana, Karma, Raja, Hatha Yoga as distinct paths, or do they ultimately converge into a single process of spiritual transformation?
They do converge into a single process. They do 100%, because I think that's where people are separating themselves. A Christian will wake up at this particular time. A Muslim will wake up at 5 a.m. to pray. Hindus consider Brahma Muhurat 3 to 5 a.m. So I know that that's considered witching hour as well, but it's essentially a time that we get for ourselves to understand the things that are not active around us before they're active. That's where I think we kind of draw the line that, oh, I wake up early because that's part of my religion. Well, I don't think so. I think I wake up early because that's all intertwined, that I meditate for my health, I do yoga for my health, but at the same time, I'm reading, something that's giving me wisdom, that's giving me ancient ideas from thousands and thousands of years ago, or even hundreds of years ago. So if we incorporate these laws, that's what Sanatan Dharma is, it's the eternal law. If we're able to incorporate these laws into everyday actions, everyday, performances that we're doing in this grand play that we call Maya, right? Then I think we're able to break from that aspect of illusion. Because when we're separating everything, that's where that Dvaita mentality comes in. That's where that duality comes in. That everything has to be separate from each other. That you can't bring them into harmony. I don't think that's how we're able to come into harmony. That's just creating chaos. So, for instance, the lunar cycle, it's supposed to impact humans in many tremendous ways. 28 days. We're supposed to have 13 months if we went off the correct mathematical calculations of having months that are 28 days long. That naturally corresponds with feminine health, as in we as females have 28-day long cycles. And so I think that's what's causing a lot of chaos, not only on the external world, but within ourselves. People are constantly anxious. People are constantly depressed. People have ideas about destruction rather than creation. That creative energy is lacking nowadays. So I think it's because we're just so away from this incorporation of nature. Well, it's that Purushan Prakriti, as I've been saying, right? We've separated them so much that we think that, oh, the static energy that's constantly there, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be strong. As soon as Prakriti gets involved, though, it will be destroyed. That's the whole idea of Prakriti. That's nature. It creates and it destroys. We need to be prepared in how to incorporate that and fix that into our lives, because if we have them separated, it causes weakness. Why? Because people have gaps left. Every time they separate something, there's a gap left into that separation. So when you're filling in the blanks, you'll just fill it in with like there's no cohesive thoughts there. And when you don't have cohesive thoughts, that's where your inner world goes into chaos. That's the whole idea of bringing this yogic mindset, having your body into union with your mind, your body into union with your breath, your body into union with your soul. But that idea of I is still controlling everything. And that I is that divinity, I think, that we've been given.
Very interesting. And just speaking of nature and lunar cycles, I did just remember that the turtle shell, interestingly enough, corresponds to this lunar cyclical time. In Native American traditions, they recognize this, but there are 13 plates in the center of a turtle shell corresponding to these 13 lunar months, 28 plates around this 13 plates in the center, representing the 28 days in each of these 13 lunar months. And I do think it's fascinating to see that if we did adapt a lunar calendar, we could have 13 even months of 28 days, 1 day left over, and we've kind of moved toward a more divine feminine approach rather than the patriarchal, masculine, zodiacal signs, going back to the ancient Egyptians with the 36 decans, and then the Babylonians formalizing these into 12 months prior to the Gregorian calendar. So it is fascinating just to understand time, how we perceive it, the connections between humanity and nature. Yeah, the lunar cycle is very interesting. I also know Soma in the Rig Veda is connected to the moon as well, which is another fascinating connection. Just the belief that this juice was stored up in the clouds and the rainstorms would bring it down, and this association between the rain falling and mushrooms growing and then potentially Soma becoming this fungal sacrament. I think it's very fascinating to explore the potentials of these myths beyond their literal interpretations and looking at the metaphorical, symbolical, allegorical, more mystical understandings.
That reminds me, the Orthodox practice like of Hinduism, they considered Lord Shiva directly connected to the moon. And Lord Shiva, his other name is Lord Soma. So it's interesting when you say that because they call him the intoxicated one. And the Orthodox practice have an excuse to basically drink and consume different types of, substances just in the name of Lord Shiva. That's that Orthodox practice that they've taken, and manipulated for their own benefit. So Lord Shiva isn't necessarily the god of intoxication. He is kind of the alchemist, if they say. Naturally, within our bodies, we're able to produce all these chemicals and all these substances. So at the end of the day, Lord Shiva is kind of the idea on how you're able to enhance this within, and at the same time control the ones that are causing more toxic energies within too. Because of course, where there's light, there's going to be darkness. That's the natural state of, this third dimensional world we live in. So that's what Lord Shiv teaches us, in the Orthodox practice, that if we're able to control these substances within, you don't need these external forces. You don't need these external substances. But people have been misusing these abilities, and it's caused there to be a negative connotation in the Orthodox practice. So that's why now when we're getting into the more esoteric realm of it, you're able to understand the times you're supposed to be, incorporating in those practices. There's a lot of rishis, they go into these states of tapasya. Tapasya means these meditative states where they're doing heavy penances. And they'll meditate without food, without water. And so that's the only time they're partaking in these practices of consuming certain substances, just so that they can tap into these dimensions and they're not being governed by all these other external forces.
I hear that a lot with Orthodox communities in general, that especially in Eastern philosophical systems, that these external sacraments or entheogenic substances may not be needed, and that Amrita or Soma is generated within and is this cerebrospinal fluid that can be transferred up the spine through meditation, ritual, contemplative practice. And I do think it's interesting, it's fascinating to me that if you look back through the history of global spirituality, you kind of have this transformation from a literal sacrament to more of a metaphorical nature, whether it's in the Zoroastrian Hauma and the Hindu Soma, whether it's in the Buddhist Amrita, whether it's in the Taoist shift from Huaidon or external elixirs to Nadon or internal alchemy. And it's fascinating to think how different systems have moved toward this more metaphorical understanding and doing away with the external catalysts that may have originally been the genesis for spiritual consciousness in humanity. I do think there is a balance that can be found, and that these systems, we can incorporate aspects of external sacraments with internal meditative practices, and there can be some kind of cohesion rather than an exclusive truth with only one or only the other. Even in the body, there's endogenous DMT or dimethyltryptamine, which is one of the most potent hallucinogenic compounds that can be found within our bodies already. The shift from external to internal is fascinating, but like I said, I do think we can rise above the duality in the spirit of Advaita Vedanta and find a non-dual solution to the debate. All right, I'm going to move back. We talked about Tantra, Mantra, and Yantra. Tantric traditions include sophisticated systems of meditation, visualization, mantra recitation, deity yoga, ritual symbolism, subtle body practices, sacred geometry, and philosophical inquiry. Mantras such as Om, the Gayatri Mantra, and numerous single-syllable mantras are traditionally understood as vibrational expressions of consciousness, rather than merely symbolic prayers. Initiation by a qualified teacher has historically been regarded as essential because these practices are intended to transform perception. Similar sacred uses of sound appear in Gregorian chant, Quranic recitation, Hebrew liturgy, Buddhist mantra traditions, and indigenous ceremonial singing, like the Shipibo Kanibo use of ikaros or sacred songs in ayahuasca healing. Tantra is often misunderstood in popular culture. How would you explain its authentic spiritual purpose, and what role do mantra, yantra, sacred sound, and initiation play within these traditions?
So it's like the source of light is like, the first form of energy that was ever, I guess, brought into form. But the Upanishads, they say that it's the sound. It's how something is able to resonate, that has its actual energy that's higher than light itself too. So I think that these mantras are heard within, and we just have to bring this awareness, because a lot of times we're constantly listening to what the outside world is saying or how our five senses are affecting our own thoughts. And so I think the mantras get diluted with everyday life and practice. So if we make ourselves the yantra so pure, so clean, with exercise, yoga, eating right, all these different things, well, then your yantra is safe. Then your mantra is the breath. Well, you are able to practice breath work. You're able to practice speaking right, speaking clearly, making sure, you're practicing ahimsa, where you're not partaking in the idea of violence. And so that's where that tantra is able to come out, not as a perfected action in a sense, but more so an impactful action, right? People's intention with attention that brings something, into action. And now that intention and that attention can cause it to be negative, positive, or neutral. Those are the ideas we go off of. In reality, a negative concept might allow us to go into motion for an action that will cause some sort of positive reaction. So I think that's where the idea of mantra, yantra, tantra comes into place, that when you bring these two ideas together, it's the intention and the attention that you bring with them that causes that tantra to come out as is. People misuse their intention. They put their attention to wrong things, so that tantric practice naturally comes out in a wrong way, where it's affecting the external world in a way where it's harmful. And so that's where we get stuck, that, you can focus on 100,000 different good positive aspects. But as soon as somebody has one negative action performed, all the attention goes there. And so I think that's what's caused it to be diluted, especially in Orthodox Hinduism. Tantra is considered black magic. And that's just an idea, a word that they've given nowadays, just because of the sheer ignorance of understanding that you're not just performing magic at certain times for certain things that you want. Magic can be happening every second, every day. I mean, the plants coming into bloom, birth, death, this is all magic constantly happening, right? So we have to have that idea and that ability to not differentiate them. The idea of ego, people think it's bad. Oh, ego is negative. He has so much ego. I think it's the only defense mechanism we've been given to protect our own identity. Now, people get lost in their names and where they come from and their histories and their parents, all these labels that they've been given. So their identity there is being defended by this false ego of all these ideas of the past, of what they can become in the future. But in reality, it's the now, how they're acting now, how they're performing their actions now is what's causing there to be value in their presence and how they're resonating. That's how they'll resonate. If their actions in the now are impactful, well, how impactful are they? Are they harming somebody? Are they out of malice? Or are they out of grace? Whatever actions you're performing, the intention and the attention controls the outcome. That's what it comes down to. And that's what the Yantra is able to decide when the mantra is added into it. Then you can figure out what the Tantra is.
Beautifully said. And it reminds me of the Zoroastrian Trinitarian philosophical concept of good thoughts, good words, good deeds. I've heard before it said that your thoughts become your words, become your actions, become your reputation, become your legacy. And it's this concept that you kind of touched on with your attention to philosophical concepts or bringing thoughts to action can impact the manifestation of the intention. So very brilliantly said. I think it's important to realize the power that we have as the self, which does encapsulate the ego. And to your point, many people view the ego as a part of their being that needs to be dissolved or done away with in its entirety. There's a lot of language in spiritual systems that discuss the dissolution of the ego, and it's often misinterpreted. I think we have to realize that our ego is what allows us to move toward accomplishment, to have any kind of sense of who we are, where we came from, our heritage, our abilities, our history, and how we can best utilize the talents that we've been given in order to generate a message or a gift for humanity in the future. So rather than doing away with the ego, I think it's important to recontextualize it as refining the ego and doing away with the qualities of the self that may inhibit us, inhibit growth, while still retaining those aspects of the self that are intrinsic to who we are at our deepest core, who we are at our archetypal self that brings us closest to divinity through our human expression. So that's very good. And then in regards to the darkness that one can face, Manly Hall, I mentioned this in my last interview, but Manly Hall has a quote that says, "They wander in darkness seeking light, failing to realize that the light is in the heart of the darkness." Carl Jung describes the shadow self and says that people often fear the shadow and view it as this negative aspect, while it harbors all of the most beautiful gifts and all of the most fearful traits for a human. So one must dive into the depths to retrieve this philosophical key, so to speak. One must wander into the darkness to find that light. It's important to realize that rather than being afraid of the unknown, the more we come to know through experience, through education, we dispel all of these fears, and we realize that this darkness does harbor this mystical truth that can be found and pulled back from the depths.
Very beautifully said, Nick.
So Hindu deities often function simultaneously as historical, devotional, symbolic, psychological, and metaphysical realities. Shiva may represent absolute consciousness, the destroyer of ignorance, the supreme yogi, and the cosmic dancer who symbolizes perpetual creation and dissolution. Kali embodies transformation, time, ego, death, and liberation from fear. Krishna represents divine love, wisdom, play, and the intimate relationship between the individual soul and ultimate reality. Similar symbolic archetypes appear in ancient Egyptian, Greek, Buddhist, Christian, and Kabbalistic spiritual systems, where myth communicates profound metaphysical truths through sacred imagery. So for those unfamiliar with Hindu symbolism, how should we understand deities such as Shiva, Kali, and Krishna beyond the assumption that they are simply mythological characters?
Well, since you've mentioned our cosmic dancer, I have my little Nataraj here. Krishna, Kali, and Shiv. Well, it's funny that they're all depicted as the dark ones. They're the shade of the night. They're considered to be very fierce in nature, all three of them. Very potent in their ideas, and they're very different. When it comes to Lord Shiva, he has a side of calmness to him. He has a side of tranquility and bliss to him, but he also has a side of Bhairav. Bhairav naturally translates into the angry one. So when he is angry, that means that's where the dissolution of ego comes into place. Now, what is the dissolution of ego? That's essentially everything that we have taught ourselves to believe. You stop believing, because when you believe, you leave room for doubt. And Lord Shiva is telling us constantly that you need to seek. You must seek, and you must be, constantly seeking within your life, within this time that you have. A cup half empty can always be poured into. That's why I learned this from Sadhguru, Guru Juggy, that I don't know is one of the best answers you can say. Because if you constantly say, oh yeah, I already knew that, oh, my thoughts are like this on this, and you have an opinion formed on everything, you close yourself off into understanding. And so when you say, I don't know, you're able to sit down, listen, and observe without naturally having a judgment. And from your own experience, you're able to then form your own actual true factual opinion, because they're off of your own facts, your own experiences, but it's an opinion that you're creating when you want to speak about it to somebody. That's what I think Lord Shiva does. Kali, on the other hand, same thing. She is a dissolver of negative energy forces, but it's not external energy forces. It's that internal darkness that we have. I think that's why all these three deities are dark. It's because they're going on that idea of darkness within. The light is on the outside always. We're trying to constantly break free and find this light outside somewhere else. But tapping into that darkness allows that true transformation to happen. And so Kali is that feminine aspect of transformation, if we think about it. That feminine aspect we must control within ourselves. Because of course there's the divine feminine we have, but there is also a toxic form of that femininity that comes in through time, that comes in through all the different changes in the cycle of time that we have, of all these different yugas. If you heard of the yugs, we have the golden age, we have the bronze age, the iron age that we're currently in, the silver age. And so throughout the ages, the ideas change within a person, from people, from society, from actions that are happening, from the lack of resources into the shift of resources. Each era has its own concepts. So we all have our internal battles in each era. Kali helps us control that feminine aspect of ourselves inside. So Treta Yuga is the yuga of Lord Rama. That's when Vishnu took one of his avatars in to form Lord Ram. That's where the Ramayana came from. And essentially, if you look at the feminine aspect of it, Sita, his consort, went through a lot of misery, a lot of pain, a lot of hardship. And her end was kind of sad too, to where she was questioned on her kids in front of her husband, and her husband couldn't even claim her. And so at that point, I don't know what the symbolism is like at this moment, but the Orthodox concept is that Mother Earth took her and basically buried her alive within herself. And so it comes to the idea that this divine feminine had to fight so much to prove a very small point to this world. And so that's that constant inner battle that we have of the feminine and the masculine, because masculine, I guess in this idea, is the external world. And the feminine is her internal thought process, her internal idea of what Lord Rama was going through. Was it fair? Was it not fair? If her fight was valid throughout all of this. So that's that aspect of that feminine energy coming into place where Kali kind of exists within all of us. And Lord Krishna, he's intense too. He's that intense self of within, but he's more of a playful being. He kind of teaches us that doesn't matter if you lose your brothers, doesn't matter if you lose your parents, doesn't matter if you're born into the wrong household, doesn't matter of all the hardships you go through. You can playfully move through all aspects of life and make yourself such a better version of yourself that you're irreplaceable. In whatever place you're ever put into life, you become irreplaceable. People love you, people depend on you, people have that constant current attraction with you. And so that's another name for Lord Krishna. It actually translates into attraction in a sense of like the attractive one. And so that's what his actions always played, that he's always, on this flute. He's always mischievous. He's always, doing what's considered orthodoxly incorrect. But why do we consider him a divine being now? It's because he went through all these hardships of life, losing his parents, losing his cousins, fighting against his cousins, being forced to marry all these women against his will. Like a lot of things that he said shouldn't have happened in life and should never happen in life. But I still moved through it in a playful manner. So I think all these three characters of mythology, or these ideas of people, or these ideas of personifications of energies, they come down to just that inner darkness within and the different roles of this darkness has.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned there's this quote, "The wise man knows that he knows not." And for every one thing that we do know, there's 100 things or more that we don't know. And that's just the nature of a finite existence. It's not possible to know everything that can be known. And it's completely fine to not know. And that's the ground for Matthew 7:7 says, "Ask and it shall be answered, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened unto you." We have to realize that we don't know before we can ask what we want to know, and then put into practice the search in order to get the answers that we want to retrieve. I think that's very fascinating. And you also mentioned this story of Rama and Sita, and this masculine, feminine, this search. We've talked before, but in the Ramayana or Ramayan and Ramcharitamanas, there's this story of Rama, and Sita is his bride. She gets kidnapped by the evil Ravana, taken away to his kingdom. And then in order to rescue her, Rama gets the help of these beings, Hanuman, squirrels come and they bring these stones with the squirrels filling in these gaps between the stones in order for this bridge to be created so Rama can get to Ravana and rescue Sita. The concept of the smallest creatures can help in the great work, and this reunification of this duality that's been separated so that it can be reunified in this cosmic creative dance. So is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Basically, when these mammals in nature were coming up with these rocks and stones and pebbles, they realized that they wouldn't float, that when they would make this bridge, that the rocks wouldn't float. So somehow, I think it was Lord Hanuman, he came up with the idea that if we write wrong on each stone, that these stones will float, and the path then will be able to make. So in a sense that, yeah, their journey was with Ram, to bring Ram with his consort, but the journey itself is Ram. So is to be Ram, to be within himself, and to understand that you're walking on the path of Ram. So what made him so divine as a being? Well, he was forced into going into the forest for 13 years, 14 years, because his father didn't want him to have the throne at that time due to one of his stepmoms being upset. Like, that's me saying it in the very most basic, language we can understand. But he went through all these hardships and still had this demeanor that was very composed, this very, king-like mindset, to where he didn't want to harm anybody around him. And so that's what caused him to be so divine, that even after losing everything, he was still rich within, rich with all his senses. And that's what caused that essence of him to constantly, be thought about. I mean, we resonate with Rama as we speak because his essence has been left over just due to his righteous actions. And I think that's what the Amrit is. That's what that ultimate nectar is. That divine bliss is, that even after you pass away or you die or move on from this realm, if your essence is left in a positive manner and people are able to have a divine aspect of you, that's the ultimate bliss any soul after life has.
Thank you for that addition. That was beautifully said as well. Moving on, we're running out of time, so I'm trying to just make sure we get to everything really quick. The Guru tradition extends back to the earliest Upanishads, where wisdom was transmitted directly from teacher to student through dialogue, meditation, and lived example. Initiation often signifies entry into a disciplined path rather than mere membership in an organization. At the same time, modern history reminds us that discernment is essential, since spiritual authority can be either genuinely transformative or misused. Comparable teacher-student relationships exist among Buddhist lamas, Sufi sheikhs, Christian elders, Hasidic rebbes, and philosophical schools reaching back to Socrates and Plotinus. So why has the guru-disciple relationship remained so central throughout Hindu history? And how can modern seekers distinguish authentic guidance from unhealthy forms of authority?
Gurus in the current time we live in kind of think that they're the preachers of God. They're the ones that are saying the word of God. And they kind of forget that God didn't create religion. God just created man. If we go in the Orthodox concept, right? God created man, and then man later created religion. So the idea of control came from man itself. And so these gurus, these preachers are only here trying to control the human mind from a very basic concept that, we'll fulfill your needs on behalf of God. I think that's what the current mindset is nowadays. And in reality, it should be that there is so much wisdom out there in so many different fields, in so many different aspects that we individually cannot tap into by ourselves. We can do our best, but we always need that nudge, that guidance in the correct way, I guess, to understand that we don't know everything, but we can, learn as much as we can to be the better version of ourselves. These gurus are already saying that, there's nothing wrong with you, but you ate this at like 6 o'clock in the evening. They're not telling anybody, the reason behind it. They're just saying that, I as a guru am able to know what you did in the past. I as a guru am able to predict your future. So therefore, I have control over your time now. I don't think that's the right way to live or to understand, because not only are you leaving space for doubt for yourself, but you're letting somebody else come in to kind of manipulate your doubt for you. And they might use it against you, because at that point, having like half knowledge is one of the most problematic, poisonous things to have, that you have knowledge about something, but it's half of it. Like you don't have the full idea concept of it. And you're going out and preaching these ideas or telling people that you learned something, when in reality, you don't even know how to utilize that tool. And from that is where chaos comes from. I think that's where these preachers and gurus are coming into place now, where they're just creating more chaos than that union within people. Gurus should be into place now to teach people how to live within each other, away from labels, away from transactions, away from, any sort of ulterior motive. Just on the idea of being a human being. What does that mean? And then go from there and dig deeper into different ideas and concepts, and bring these unions, these ideas into union. Kind of like what you're doing through your platform, You're bringing all these points of knowledge, all these different ideas from all these different dimensions of people, and you're bringing it to one platform. And it's kind of you being a guru in that aspect, to where you're bringing knowledge and you're letting people do whatever they want with that knowledge. You're bringing it out into the light, so that way that darkness isn't always there for them. That light is there for them to use whenever they need to. Gurus, on the other hand, nowadays, they don't think of it like that. They think of that, oh, I've given you the knowledge. You need to use it like this so it could work for you. And if you don't do it this way, you're going to get punished by God.
It's an interesting dichotomy, because there is a need for people who are truly seeking, they're truly searching for spiritual meaning. They want to find a lineage or another person, an organization that they can trust enough to do the hard work for them, or that may have generational access to knowledge that they've learned through their teachers and their teachers going back all of this time. But it is also frustrating when the people that have either acquired this knowledge or are in these positions of power, they learn that through that power they can manipulate others, they can do things to get what they want. That is not in the best interest of the people that are the receiving laymen. And so you have this dichotomy between the need for some kind of organized institutional form for people to seek answers from, that can preserve knowledge beyond the human lifespan or inherit knowledge from generations past. But also, once that teacher realizes the power that they have over others, it's very easy, and you see it throughout history, that it becomes misused. And this selfish nature, this subjective truth pervades, rather than just the objectivity of allowing people the information from all these different global spiritual systems, or even within one spiritual system, but offering it to them on an objective basis so that there's no kind of persuasion of an idea. It's not trying to persuade them to believe a certain thing. It's trying to give them access to the knowledge to where they can have the experience themselves. And so I think that is an interesting dichotomy. It's very important throughout global spiritual history. It's kind of the crux of the issue between the esoteric understandings of spirituality and the more exoteric nature of religion, especially institutional, hierarchical, organized religion that we see, whether it's in the East or the West. I think that's an interesting point. I'm going to move to our last question. Scholars of comparative religion have long noted recurring themes across many wisdom traditions, including the search for union with ultimate reality, the transformation of consciousness, ethical purification, contemplative practice, symbolic initiation, and the recognition that ordinary perception reveals only part of reality. The Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, yoga traditions, and tantras have frequently been compared with Mahayana Buddhism, Sufism, Christian mysticism, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, Jewish Kabbalah, Taoism, and indigenous contemplative shamanic systems. At the same time, each spiritual system preserves unique metaphysical assumptions, practices, symbols, and historical contexts that make careful comparison both fascinating and intellectually rewarding. I want to read a quote by Hindu mystic Ramakrishna before I get into the question. He says, "God has made different religions to suit different aspirations, times, and countries. As one can ascend to the top of a house by means of a ladder, a bamboo, a staircase, or a rope, so diverse are the ways and means to approach God, and every religion in the world shows one of these ways. People partition off their lands by means of boundaries, but no one can partition off the all-encompassing sky overhead. The indivisible sky surrounds all and includes all. So people in ignorance say, 'My religion is the only one. My religion is the best.' But when a heart is illumined by true knowledge, it knows that above all these wars of sects and sectarians presides the one indivisible, eternal, all-knowing bliss. All gods and goddesses are but various aspects of the one absolute Brahman." So, having explored both traditional Hinduism and its mystical dimensions, where do you see the deepest points of convergence between Hindu philosophy and other contemplative traditions around the world? And where do you believe important differences remain?
I think Hinduism shouldn't be even called an ism, because there's so many different ways to practice it, and that's what makes it so beautiful and unique, that there isn't one way of living. There's just many possibilities and many ways of living, and you have outcomes to life. Hinduism does kind of have a dimension, an idea where it has different dimensions. Like there's a hellish, dimension, but there's many layers to that. As in the underworld is considered the hell in the Western world, right? So in Hinduism, we think of it as many layers to it. It's considered loks. So right now we're in the middle earth state, the neutral state, called the Bhurlok, the Bhuvlok. Underneath that, you have your hellish states, your underworld states that are, Patal Lok, Naglok. Each one is governed by different sorts of energy, different sorts of concept. Time works differently in all these different looks. So if you look at it, if you ascend, though, you have your heaven-like states, your heaven looks. So you can go through these different dimensions to where you're ascending from your third dimension into your fourth, fifth, sixth dimension, all the way up to your 13th dimension. So I think we see that when it comes down to the concept of heaven and hell, but in the Western world, it's not really dissected because we're just constantly thinking about just good and bad. We're constantly thinking about, good versus evil. But in Hinduism, there's no fine line like that. There's a gradient. There's many outcomes to the way you act. Now, there's different levels of, heaven and hell you can go through. Another way it's similar is that in Islam, they are very focused on the lunar calendar. They fast with the lunar calendar. A lot of their practices throughout the month are impacted by the lunar calendar. And that's what Hinduism, if we think about in the Orthodox way, has always been controlled by, the planetary system, the moon, its cycle, everything on that. So I think a lot of things were influenced in that aspect. In another sense, the physical movements, so the contortion of your body in different, positions, it's kind of depicted from yoga. In Islam, you have to get down on your knees 5 times a day and get up. If you look at it in a health perspective, your gut is constantly being moved up and down, opening up. So your gut is controlling 70% of your body. Majority of your brain's thoughts are coming from your gut, how it's processing things. When you're moving your body in these certain positions, these certain ways, it's activating your mind in different ways too. I think that's one comparison I see to where we do yoga in the mornings. The people that are practicing Islam, they also wake up to pray in the morning time, but they're doing all these body movements to get that stimulation going. That's one idea. There's so many more we can tap into, we can count, but I don't know how much time we have.
Well, you mentioned the loks. I know that in Jainism, they map out this cosmological diagram with the loks and the Loka Purusha, or the cosmic man. In regards to the Abrahamic faiths, the Christian narrative and calendar is often more aligned with the solar aspect, whereas the lunar aspect pervades the Islamic side. And Judaism, this central core, is more planetary and stellar. You touched on duality. Everybody wants to see things in black or white. They want clear answers. It either is or it isn't. Very binary. When in reality, most things are a spectrum, like you said, and gray is usually, everything exists on this scale of gray. Some gray can be more white, some gray can be more black, some can almost appear white or appear black, but traditionally it's very hard to have these idealistic, archetypal concepts play out in the real world. Typically, we see the spectrum, like you were saying, in this in-between realm of these dual extremes.
So, kind of going off of what you're saying, light and dark, it's funny that Lord Shiva, a mantra that they say, they call him Karpura Gauram, Karnavataram, Sansarasaram. So they're talking about him being the white one. But when we were just speaking earlier about Lord Shiva, he's considered the dark one as well. He's considered the darkest of them all. Same thing with Kali. Her name is Kali when it comes down to the internal world. But to the external world, to Lord Shiva, she's considered Gauri. That's what her name is, the white one, the pure one, the color of camphor. Camphor is white, the most white thing on earth, the most pure thing on earth, to dissolve any sort of ego. So I think that's what Sanatanam Dharam is, that we get away from all the labels and whatever this Maya is giving us, right? Because when we're in this Maya, we're given our parents, we're given the sansaram, we're given this idea to live and to preserve ourselves. But in reality, this preservation is a journey to somewhere. Where is it? Everybody has their own idea of a different destination, but we're all on the same journey. And I think we forget that Sanatanam Dharam is just another word for a journey. We're just all on this trip, through life. We're going through it, and we got to figure it out ourselves, because we are controlling our choices at this moment. Destiny could be written however you want, but destiny doesn't control what you're currently thinking right now. You can control your own destiny by your own current thoughts. And I think that's what Sanatanam Dharma is saying, that be the driver of your own vehicle on this crazy trip. And don't hire a chauffeur at this point, because the chauffeur won't take you anywhere. You'll just be stuck there constantly pushing that gas pedal, but you'll be in park. So you yourself can go into drive mode. You yourself can rev up the gas and move fast throughout the journey, or just go slow and understand each thing that you're seeing. Observe each idea of nature around you and bring it into that Purush, that body that you've been given. Because that energy, it's what's causing us to all drive ourselves forward. Now, in which way we go, yeah, the destination will change for all of us, because we all think differently. But this journey, we're all in this world, this lok, this bhuvlok right now together.
Beautifully said. We're all in this together. I think that's a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your insights on Hinduism. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your friendship, and I look forward to talking with you again. Maybe we can schedule another interview in the future and keep talking on some of these concepts.
Definitely. It was an honor being here, Nick. Thank you for allowing me to speak and understanding your point of view and really developing our relationship on this particular concept, because it's missing, I think, in the world nowadays. And I'm so proud of you that you're bringing this out into the world and bringing this light upon, everybody, for us to be able to use it as a tool. So thank you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your appreciation. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to talking with you here soon. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.